how do we create a truly fair society? It's a question really that hits home for all of us because we've all, wrestled with what feels fair, what's equitable, what people deserve. Today, we're doing a deep dive into one of the most influential answers to that question, John Rawls' huge work, A Theory of Justice. We're going to try and unpack this pretty complex book that's our source material for today, get to the core ideas, the real nuggets. Our mission, basically, to give you a shortcut to understanding Rawls' ideas, which are, let's be honest, revolutionary. We want to make them accessible, even if you've never really touched philosophy before. Think of this as your step-by-step guide.
Exactly. And Rawls's work, it offers this really systematic way to think about justice. It gives a solid alternative to philosophies that dominated for a long time, like utilitarianism. Our goal here is to break down his main concepts, define everything clearly, maybe use some analogies and show how justice as fairness, as he calls it, aims for a stable, just society. Hopefully you'll walk away with a real aha moment about what justice could actually look like.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. Rawls kicks off by thinking about the role of justice in social cooperation. So, fundamentally, what is society for Rawls? And why do we even need principles of justice anyway?
Yeah, this is key. He sees society as a cooperative venture for mutual advantage. We team up because, well, we can achieve more together than alone. That's the identity of interests. But, and this is crucial, it's also marked by conflict. We all want a share of the benefits from cooperating, and we often disagree strongly about how to divide things up. That's the conflict of interests.
Okay. So there's this built-in tension.
Precisely. And that tension means we absolutely need principles of social justice. We need rules to assign rights and duties fairly within society's main institutions and to figure out what a fair distribution of the benefits and burdens looks like.
So justice isn't just like a nice ideal. It's fundamental for cooperation to even work fairly.
Exactly.
And what does Rawls say is the primary subject of justice? What specifically needs regulating?
He calls it the basic structure of society. This isn't just about individual acts of unfairness, it's the big stuff. The political constitution, the economic setup, the major social arrangements. And the effects of this structure, he says, are profound and present from the start. It shapes your whole life, your opportunities right from birth.
Wow. Okay.
And it's often this very structure that creates these deep inequalities, differences based on where you start in society, or even your natural talents, inequalities that aren't really earned or deserved by merit. Rawls' principles are aimed squarely at regulating these kinds of inequalities.
It's starting to sound a bit like those classic social contract theories, Hobbes, Locke.
Okay.
But Rawls does something different, right? More abstract.
Exactly right. He generalizes and carries to a higher level of abstraction the traditional conception of the social contract. So instead of imagining some actual historical agreement, he introduces this purely hypothetical initial situation. Think of it less like a historical event and more like a thought experiment. It includes specific procedural constraints designed to lead rational people to agree on fair principles.
That's a thought experiment.
Okay.
Yeah, the agreement isn't something people actually sign up to. But the conditions of this hypothetical setup are meant to be ones we'd all find reasonable and fair if we really thought about it impartially. It's a way to discover what justice requires.
Okay, let's get into this initial situation, the original position, as he calls it. Sounds fascinating. Who are the people doing the choosing here? What are they like?
Right, so the parties in this original position are defined as rational and mutually disinterested. Now, mutually disinterested sounds a bit cold, but doesn't mean they're selfish in the usual sense. It just means they aren't taking an interest in other people's interests, positively or negatively. They're focused on advancing their own system of ends, their own life plan, whatever it might be, as best they can. And they do this by trying to secure the highest index of primary social goods for themselves. They're just trying to get the best deal possible on these fundamental goods, knowing they have to agree on principles that everyone else in the same position will also accept.
And this leads us to probably the most famous bit, the veil of ignorance. What is that, and why is it so crucial for fairness?
Yes, the veil. This is where it gets really clever. The veil of ignorance is the central device within this original position. Imagine you're about to choose the basic rules for your society, but you step behind this veil. And behind it, you forget nearly all particular information about yourself.
Like what kind of information?
Everything specific. You don't know your social class, your natural talents. Are you brilliant or average, strong or weak? You don't know your gender, your race, your religion, what you value, your conception of the good life. You don't even know which generation you'll belong to.
Wow, so you're completely stripped of your identity. Why?
Well, it serves two main purposes. First, it ensures no one is in a position to tailor principles to his advantage. If you don't know whether you'll be rich or poor, you're not going to choose principles that unfairly benefit the rich, are you?
No, you'd want protection if you ended up poor.
Exactly. Second, it corrects for what Rawls calls the arbitrariness of the world. Things like being born into a wealthy family or having incredible natural talent. Those are accidents of birth, right? They're morally arbitrary. Since getting more just because you're lucky isn't a principle of justice, the veil removes those arbitrary advantages and ensures a truly fair, impartial starting point for choosing the rules.
So ignorance forces impartiality. Because you can be anyone, you have to choose principles that are fair to everyone. It's ingenious, really. And you mentioned primary goods that they're trying to secure. What are those exactly?
Primary goods are the essential things that persons need in their status as free and equal citizens, things everyone needs to pursue any rational life plan, whatever that plan might be. Think basic liberties, freedom of speech, conscience, that sort of thing. Opportunities, fair access to education and jobs, income and wealth, and, really importantly, the social basis of self-respect.
Self-respect.
Yeah, the conditions that allow you to feel like a valued member of society, that your life plan is worthwhile. Rawls thinks these are things any rational person would want, regardless of their specific goals. The all-purpose means to living a good life in society.
Okay, so the veil ensures impartiality. The goal is securing primary goods. This sets the stage perfectly. What principles does Rawls argue these rational veiled individuals would actually choose?
Right. He argues they would agree on two main principles. And crucially, these principles are arranged in a serial order, sometimes called lexical order, meaning the first principle has absolute priority over the second. You can't violate the first principle, even if it means you could get more of what the second principle offers. The order matters.
Okay, let's take the first one then. The principle of equal basic liberties. What's that about?
This one states, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties compatible with a similar system of liberty for all. The really powerful part here is its priority. Infringements of the basic equal liberties cannot be justified or compensated for by greater social and economic advantages.
So you can't trade freedom for money, basically.
Pretty much. You can't sacrifice fundamental freedoms like freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, the right to vote just to make society richer overall, or even to improve the economic lot of the less fortunate. These liberties are foundational.
What specific liberties fall under this?
We're talking things like freedom of thought and conscience, political liberties, the right to vote, run for office, ensuring equal participation, freedom of association, the rights covered by the rule of law, like freedom from arbitrary arrest. The core freedoms you'd expect in a liberal democracy. These can only really be limited if they clash with other basic liberties, or in very specific cases, to maintain public order. But the key is the priority of liberty. It comes first.
Crystal clear. Okay, now for the second principle. This one deals with inequalities, right? Social and economic ones. It sounds more complicated.
It is a bit more complex, yeah.
Oh, there.
The second principle also has two parts, again in a specific order. It says that social and economic inequalities are acceptable only if they meet two conditions. They must be A, to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged members of society, and B, attached to offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity.
Okay, let's break that down. Car B first. Fair equality of opportunity. How is that different from just saying, the best person gets the job, basic meritocracy?
That's a really important distinction. Rawls distinguishes fair equality of opportunity from just having careers open to talents, which he calls natural liberty. Natural liberty might mean there are no formal barriers, but it ignores that people start from very different places due to family background, wealth, access to education, etc.
Right, some people get a huge head start.
Exactly. Fair equality of opportunity means that those with similar abilities and motivations should have similar life chances, regardless of their social class at birth. So, society has a duty not just to remove formal barriers, but to actively ensure everyone has genuinely equal chances to develop their talents through education, access to culture, and so on. It's about leveling the playing field before the race starts, not just letting the fastest runner win regardless of their starting position.
It's like ensuring everyone gets similar training and starts at the same line.
Precisely. He sees it as a form of pure procedural justice. If the procedures for competition are truly fair, then the resulting distribution, whatever it is also just.
Okay, that makes sense. Now for part A, The really famous one, the difference principle. Inequalities have to be to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged. What does that mean in practice?
Right, this is often the trickiest part. The difference principle basically says, we can allow differences in wealth and income, but only if those differences work out to help the people at the very bottom of the economic ladder the most.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine allowing doctors to earn significantly more than, say, cleaners. Is that inequality justified? According to the difference principle, it is justified if allowing those higher earnings incentivizes more talented people to become doctors, leading to better healthcare for everyone, including the poorest members of society who might otherwise lack access. But if those higher earnings just make doctors richer without improving the situation, the prospects, the overall well-being of the least advantaged group, then that inequality isn't justified under this principle.
So inequality is only okay if it lifts the floor, essentially.
That's a great way to put it. It has to maximize the position of the worst off group. Rawls even connects this to the idea of fraternity. Like, in a family, you wouldn't want to have much greater advantages unless it also somehow benefited your less well-off siblings. He also argues that natural talents, intelligence, strength, creativity should be seen as a common asset. Society benefits from these talents, so the rewards flowing from them should be arranged to benefit everyone, especially those who drew the short straw in the natural lottery.
That really challenges the idea that you deserve everything you get from your natural talents.
It does. It suggests that while you have a right to your talents, how society rewards those talents is a matter of justice, and those rewards should serve the common good, particularly the least fortunate.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Rawls was writing against utilitarianism. That was the dominant view, right? What's the fundamental clash between justice as fairness and classical utilitarianism?
Yes, utilitarianism was, and in many ways still is, a major force. Classical utilitarianism, think Bentham or Sidgwick, essentially defines the good, first usually as pleasure, happiness, or preference satisfaction, and then defines the right action as whatever maximizes that good for the greatest number of people.
So the goal is the biggest total or average happiness.
Exactly. And crucially, in that framework, individual rights or principles of justice are secondary. They can be overridden if doing so produces a better overall outcome, more total happiness.
And Rawls rejects that.
Fundamentally, he says quite powerfully, justice denies that the loss of freedom for some is made right by a greater good shared by others. You can't justify sacrificing one person's basic rights just because it makes a lot of other people happier. He argues utilitarianism makes a mistake by treating society as if it were one single person, where you can balance gains and losses across different parts. But society is made of distinct individuals, each with their own life to live.
Right. You can't just add up happiness across people like that.
Yeah. Rawls thinks that's exactly right. He argues utilitarianism mistakes impersonality for impartiality. People behind the veil of ignorance, he believes, wouldn't gamble with their fundamental liberties. They wouldn't agree to a system where they might end up being sacrificed for the greater good, even if the odds were low. They'd want to protect their basic rights and their ability to pursue their own life plan, whatever it turns out to be. That highest order interest in liberty comes first.
Okay, so if we manage to set up a society based on these two principles, equal liberty and the difference principle,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the people living in it? What are their responsibilities, their duties and obligations?
Rawls makes a useful distinction here between natural duties and obligations. Natural duties apply to everyone automatically just by virtue of being human in a society. They're unconditional.
Like what?
The big one is the duty of justice itself. The duty to support and comply with just institutions, and to help establish them if they don't exist. Others include the duty of mutual aid, helping others in need, and the duty of mutual respect. These don't depend on you volunteering for anything. Obligations, however, are different. They arise from the principle of fairness.
Okay.
This principle says you're obligated to do your part according to the rules of an institution if two conditions are met. First, the institution itself must be just, or reasonably just. And second, you must have voluntarily accepted the benefits it offers or taken advantage of the opportunities it provides to advance your own interests.
So obligations come from choosing to participate in a fair system, like keeping a promise you made.
Exactly. Making a promise is a classic example. You take on the obligation voluntarily within a practice. You aren't obligated, however, to comply with the rules of an unjust institution, even if you happen to benefit from it in some ways. Fairness is key.
That makes sense. But what if you're in a society that's mostly just, but has some specific unjust laws or policies? Does Rawls' theory allow for protest or challenge.
Yes, absolutely. He discusses this under the heading of civil disobedience, specifically within a nearly just society, one that's generally well-ordered but still has some significant flaws. He defines civil disobedience as a public, nonviolent, conscientious yet political act contrary to law, usually done with the aim of bringing about a change in the law or government policy. It's important that it's public and nonviolent.
This is not about overthrowing the government.
No, not at all. It's an appeal within the system addressed to the majority's sense of justice. It's saying, look, this particular law violates the principles of justice we all supposedly share. Interestingly, Rawls suggests civil disobedience is often more clearly justified for violations of the first principle, the principle of equal basic liberties.
Why is that?
Because violations of basic liberties like denying voting rights to a group or suppressing free speech are usually pretty blatant. They're obvious to all and often written right into law. It's easier to make a clear case that a fundamental principle is being violated. Violations of the difference principle, on the other hand, arguing about whether a particular tax policy really maximizes the position of the least advantaged, are often more difficult to ascertain. They involve complex economic arguments, statistics, predictions. It's harder to build a clear-cut case for civil disobedience based on that, though not impossible.
Interesting distinction. Does Rawls think his principles point towards a specific economic system? Like, is it socialism? Is it capitalism?
That's a really common question. His answer is basically that the theory of justice itself does not by itself favor either form of regime.
So it's flexible.
It is, to a degree. He argues that both a property-owning democracy, which has private ownership of the means of production, but uses extensive taxes and regulations to disperse wealth and capital widely and ensure fair equality of opportunity, and the difference principle and a liberal socialist regime with public ownership and worker-managed firms could, in principle, satisfy his two principles of justice.
So the specific system isn't the point.
The point is whether the system, whatever its label, has the right background institutions in place to guarantee the priority of liberty, ensure genuine fair equality of opportunity, and make sure inequalities work to the maximum benefit of the least advantaged. Which system does that best might depend on a society's history, traditions, and circumstances.
Okay, this leads to maybe a deeper question. If you have these just institutions, will people actually want to be just? How does this sense of justice develop? Does Rawls talk about moral psychology?
He does, yeah. He thinks it's crucial for the stability of a just society. He outlines 3 stages or laws of moral development. First is the morality of authority, basically. Kids learn trust and basic moral precepts from loving and trustworthy parents. Second is the morality of association. As people participate in groups with fair rules, like teams, friendships, workplaces, they develop bonds of trust and a sense of fairness based on cooperation. And finally, there's the morality of principles. Once someone sees how just institutions benefit everyone, including themselves, and they've developed ties of fellowship, they become attached to the principles of justice themselves. They want to be a just person because it expresses their nature as a free and equal rational being.
So living under just institutions actually shapes people to become just.
That's the idea. This capacity for a sense of justice is what makes Rawls' justice as fairness inherently stable. In well-ordered society run by his principles, people naturally acquire an effective desire to act justly. What's right, following the principles, becomes congruent or aligned with what's good for them, living a fulfilling life as a free and equal person. So upholding justice becomes part of their own rational life plan.
So a just society kind of reinforces itself. Would that mean negative feelings like envy would just vanish?
Well, Rawls acknowledges envy exists and calls it generally a vice, something harmful to individuals and society. But he makes a distinction. He talks about excusable envy.
Excusable envy.
Yeah, envy that might arise if someone's position in society is so low, their share of primary goods so small, that it genuinely wounds his self-respect. It's less about wanting what others have and more about feeling degraded by your own situation. But, Rawls argues, a society properly regulated by his two principles, especially with the emphasis on equal basic liberties, and the difference principle ensuring the floor is as high as possible, is designed precisely to minimize the conditions that create this excusable envy. By ensuring everyone's basic liberties and boosting the prospects of the least advantaged, it shores up everyone's self-respect, which he calls the main primary good. This makes the society more stable because people feel valued and fairly treated, reducing resentment.
Okay, so let's try and recap. We've journeyed through Rawls' A Theory of Justice, starting with an amazing thought experiment, the original position behind the veil of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw how that hypothetical choice leads to two core principles. First, the absolute priority of equal basic liberties for everyone.
Can't be traded away.
Right. And second, that any social and economic inequalities have to meet two tough tests. They must benefit the least advantaged group the most, the difference principle, and be linked to jobs and positions open to everyone under conditions of genuinely fair equality of opportunity.
Exactly. We also contrasted this sharply with utilitarianism, showing how Rawls puts individual rights and the separateness of persons front and center. And we touched on how these just institutions are meant to foster a sense of justice in people, reducing things like corrosive envy and making the whole system stable from within.
It really is a powerful, detailed picture of what a fair society might look like. Very systematic.
It absolutely is. And it gives us such a useful framework, a lens really, for looking at our own societies and asking, how well do we measure up?
Definitely food for thought. So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, here's something to chew on. If you were behind that veil of ignorance, totally unsure of who you'd be, is there any single principle of justice, maybe something beyond what Rawls proposed, that you would insist on adding? Something you'd prioritize above all else, and why? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into a theory of justice. We hope you found it insightful. Until next time.